I'm Alicia, and I will be talking about Chapter 11, going over gender and behavior. Um, I kind of broke it down into four little sections. First, I'm going to talk about distinguishing between sex and gender. From the textbook, I found that most scholars tend to use gender to associate with learned behaviors and use like the word sex to discuss biological differences between females and males. Of course, there's a lot of controversy between there being only two genders, especially in communities like LGBTQ plus IA. So that wasn't really discussed in the book, and so I'm not going to discuss it. Let's see. The next portion talks about stereotypes. Apparently, from reading the module, there was something like four being discussed in the book, but I could only find three. So, the three I found were first, variability occurs. So, I saw a little table showing differences between females and males. For example, there's women might have a softer tone when they're speaking, whereas males have a more powerful, confident voice. There might be a competitive spirit amongst males and a more gentle approach, wanting to tend to others for females, and other examples like that. So, yeah, there's a variable. There are variant types of behavior between the two genders that might overlap. Um, the second one is boundaries between the two genders have become less rigid. Apparently, since the 1980s, the gender roles are not so much in one straight line. Men might not go to work, and female like women will go to work. Like if there were men, fathers, they might stay home and tend to the child or children, what and like while the woman goes and does work, like goes out into her field. So that would be a difference between how gender in society might have changed and have become less formatted for women doing one specific thing, being at the house, and men being out of the house supporting the family. That's how I interpreted it. And three, the male stereotype is seen as the norm. They call that centrism, and androcentrism. I think that's how you pronounce it. And I haven't experienced it, but I've seen it. The woman will be seen as doing like too much, whereas the man is seen as a powerful personality as far as having confidence or being controlling in a way that's seen as like being good or being great at his job. And women will not be seen that way. They'll be seen as controlling in a bad way, and picky and bossy, despite being the boss or the CEO, the one in charge, the manager. And so, it's like this, I guess the societal norm is for, at least that's what this is talking about. Man is, and man and man's stereotypes are seen as normal and not so much for the women. And that's on stereotypes. And the next section I dove into was similarities between, and differences between the genders with personality and social behavior. Apparently, females have an edge in intelligence and academic achievement, It's interesting though because females also have more anxiety when it comes to taking tests and will stray away from going into STEM fields. And I was learning about this in my other intro into general psychology class. My teacher was talking about how if women were to say that they're a woman before a test, it decreases their likelihood of making as good a grade as they could have before mentioning or thinking that they are a woman. And I just thought this was interesting, and it kind of correlated with that whole notion of like identifying yourself and thinking of the societal pressure put on yourself and then taking a test. And it's normal to do this sort of thing because for most like state exams, you have to write all of your information out, like what your name is, what your gender is, your age, and whatnot. So that's very interesting, and it most likely has an effect on how grades are, like how tests are done, and maybe there should be a change. So, um, for aggression, which is when you're trying to harm someone physically or verbally, women are more aggressive relationally, like talking behind someone's backs, giving silent treatment, and men are physically more aggressive, like fighting, um, just doing things with their body, touching, that sort of thing. And with communication, in movies and television, it's seen as women are more talkative. They like to talk so much, but in reality, men are the ones who talk more and interrupt more unless women are in power, like hold a higher position, then they'll talk more and they'll interrupt more. And so the the mentioning of status comes into play, discussing whether or not status plays a part in the male and female gender identities. Um, what else did I write? I guess that is all for what I wrote for the gender differences and similarities. And finally, there was reinforcement and punishment. This is what I wrote down. There were more, but I thought this was important because I have discussed this in my other psychology class. It goes into operant learning, operant conditioning, basically the rewarding and punishment system. When you're trying to teach something to a child or an animal, you do things repeatedly through what, like if they do something and you like what they did behavior wise, you reward them with something that encourages them to continue doing the behavior. And this comes into play with children, the females and males as children, the parent seeing a certain behavior being done and either choosing to punish or reward the child for that behavior, which will encourage them to continue doing that behavior up until adulthood and making these certain choices through whatever position they hold. So, example, man or a boy crying. This is the example from the book. A boy crying and a parent saying, "Boys don't cry" or "Big boys don't cry." It will encourage the child to not do that behavior anymore, to cry. And once the child notices that the parent appreciates the crying being like stopped, they'll continue to do it because they're getting nurtured and they're getting appreciated by the parent. So that's just an example of reinforcement and punishment. And yes, that is all. Thank you.